Hello and welcome everybody to Flicker Effect. It is Thursday, August 3rd, 2023. I'm Dave Lott. Joining me for this is Bobby Jackson. How's it going, Bobby?
Going good. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. And also right here next to me, Michelle Hillard. How's it going,
Hello,
Michelle?
everyone. Hi.
In this episode, we are finally going to get around to talking about Barbenheimer. We plan to talk about both films, Barbie and Oppenheimer. Though you would think from the order of the word itself, Barbenheimer, we would start with Barbie, but we're actually going to do it the other way around. Excuse me.
We're different.
We're going to start with Oppenheimer, talk about that. We're probably not going to talk about any spoilers for Oppenheimer, hence why we're going to do that one first. And then we'll jump into Barbie. And we might do a little spoiler section of Barbie. We'll give you plenty of warning before we do. With that, anything to catch up on or anything before we get started, guys?
Just that, I guess, this is the first time we've recorded since Comic-Con? Or did we record
No, we did
I can't remember.
Yeah, we did one audio only
that's right.
podcast episode about Comic-Con. But
Yeah, and the reason why we're so delayed on the actual review for Oppenheimer and Barbie is because we were at Comic-Con
Yes.
when they released that weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about in that podcast episode that Michelle and I had just finally seen Oppenheimer just before we recorded that. And then I know since then, Bobby, you finally got to see it, I think, in the 70 millimeter version you were looking to see.
Yeah.
And Michelle and I finally just got around to seeing Barbie, 2 nights ago?
Yes.
Yeah, 2 nights ago. I think you saw it before you saw Oppenheimer.
I did, yeah.
So,
Well, why don't we ask Bobby about his experience of Oppenheimer?
yeah. I'm curious. We should all talk about how we saw Oppenheimer. I mean, Oppenheimer is, being a Christopher Nolan movie, not shocking. He filmed a lot of it on 70 millimeter IMAX. I think the stuff that wasn't technically with an IMAX camera was like 65 millimeter, is my understanding. But all film. And there are certain theaters in the States that are actually presenting a 70 millimeter IMAX print. There are not a ton. I know for us here in Orlando, the closest one to us is down in Fort Lauderdale. So it's not forever away, but it is far enough that I would really, really have to be dying to see it in that format to drive down or take a train down to Fort Lauderdale, which, did not do for this movie. So
Financially, we'd have to make a weekend out of it to make it worthwhile.
But Bobby, I believe you did see it that way. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. I did get to see it that way, and that was the only way I wanted to see it, honestly, just because Nolan made it a certain sort of way. And whenever movies, I feel like, go out of their way, and in today's age, it is kind of going out of your way to make a film print movie and to be able to display it on a large IMAX screen and not one of the LIMAX screens, because the theater I saw it in has the 1:4:3:1, I think, ratio that shows that full scale print. And it's definitely a way to go in terms of if a movie has enough footage that can show it that way, to check out a movie in that format, because seeing it on that type of a screen, it's impressive. You just really kind of get fully engulfed within the frame of the movie, just because I remember I was sitting a little bit higher up and I was thinking to myself, because I could see the very top of the screen, and when there's scenes that fill up the entirety of the screen, I had to kind of look over and down to see all the way at the very bottom of the screen. So I was like, oh man, if I was a couple more rows down, I'd see everything from top to bottom perfectly. But it was just impressive just to be able to have that aspect. And so I was very much happy that at the end of the day, I waited to see it. That's why I saw it second to Barbie, because I wanted to see it in that format. So I feel like with me having one theater that I don't have to drive super far like you guys, my theater that shows that type of presentation is like 20 minutes away. So for me, it's a no-brainer to go to that type of a theater to go see a movie like that in. So that's the way I saw it. I don't know if you guys want to talk about how you saw it, or do you want me to talk about what I thought of the movie?
What were you going to say, Michelle?
Well, I was just going to say, so side note, did you guys hear that they had to get film projectionists from California to fly out to certain places around the U.S. to help?
No, I didn't heard that.
I've heard that story, yeah.
To help actually do it. And I was like, it was funny listening to that, and I was like, oh, like, I know how to thread a film projector. I mean, I don't know how to thread, like, on that scale. I don't think I've done that, but like I've spliced together
a huge platter.
It's a very like I'm trying to think of the largest one that I did back in my day, like how it was. I want to say I don't think it was Gladiator. I want to say it was the Patriot. That was a long thread. That was a long one, but like. Yeah, like just to be able to splice film together, but then also know how a projector works. It's a dying art, and it's interesting to learn that in this day and age, there's just not enough people that know how to do that. And it's just funny. Like I think about it, like I never did anything digitally. My younger brothers, they wound up working with the same theater company I did. And they were on the cusp of when digital was coming in. So they actually learned how to do film and the beginning of digital at the time. So it's interesting. Anyway, just random thoughts.
Well, I mean, real quick, I mean, Michelle and I saw it in IMAX, but it was digital IMAX. It was not film. It was what many of us refer to as a Limax theater, which for those who don't know was... Basically, it used to be a regular movie theater that was converted to IMAX. The screen size was changed and the sound in the theater was changed. But in other words, it's not that when you think of like an IMAX theater at your science center that I remember going to, or like a Kennedy Space Center in our case, when I go to the IMAX theater there, this huge screen where the seats are pretty steep, so that basically everybody has a good view kind of thing. It's not like that. So that's how Michelle and I saw it. I wouldn't say unfortunately.
What did you think of that presentation?
I thought the presentation was actually fine.
I agree. I wouldn't say unfortunately.
The shots that are in IMAX, which is like a ton of the movie, it's not like the aspect ratio changes, but you can just tell by the look of the shot, like that it still has a great IMAX look about it. So I wasn't disappointed, especially. And I'm using the word especially, but in the case of this movie, I didn't mind it so much. There might have been other movies where the camera was maybe used in different ways where it would matter to me more. And in this one, I didn't find that it mattered to me as much. I'm saying that, and I didn't see the 70 millimeter print, so I can't compare. Maybe if I saw what you saw, Bobby, I'd go, wait, no, I'm out of my mind. This looked amazing. But no, I thought it looked quite good in the IMAX theater we saw it in.
Maybe for the 10-year anniversary and they re-release it into theaters, we'll make a trek somewhere and we'll go see it.
Then you'll have a really hard time finding some projectionist that knows how to.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, it's just crazy to think that they had to find projectionists in California and fly them to other states all over the U.S. just to help out. Like the corporation, whatever the theater company that owns it had to like reach back to corporate and they had to reach out to the studio and the studio was like, hey, we can lend you this guy. And then that person go out for like a few days and splice it together and like thread it in the machine and like show somebody else like, look, this is how this is gonna go. If anything goes wrong, this is how you troubleshoot it, and basically educate a younger generation on an art that is dying. Sorry, just random tangent.
I think one of the reasons why they're able to do those film prints, at least at the movie theater I go to, I used to work at that theater, so I know the layout really well. And the theaters that, like you said, David, most of the time when you get to a Limax theater, it's just a theater that was a regular one that was converted. And so they're set up a certain sort of way. The true IMAX theaters that are inside of a movie theater chain, they sit off in the back. And so they're almost in their own separate area of the theater. pretty much. And so when you're upstairs where the projection area is, it's a long hallway, and typically you can go from one projection area to the next in just in a straight line, and you're just going past each theater, really. And this one for the IMAX, it's in its own separate area. It's a huge room, and so they have the room to the capacity to be able to. Most of the times, most movies aren't on film, so what I imagine that they do is that they move the film platter to the side. And then typically they just have their laser projection there to show regular movies.
Right.
But they have the space there to still keep and store their film platters. So when, something comes out that's special that Nolan does, or maybe if a Tarantino does something, then they can still have that for usage and not have to worry about still trying to figure out a way to show that, or just only being able to show it in laser digital.
Yeah. And there is a 70 millimeter print here in Orlando, but it's not IMAX. So I'm still curious. Like, if I had the free time, I'd be all for going to check that out. But it's not. It's just a regular movie theater. It's a bigger theater. I saw Hateful Eight in 70 millimeter there. It's down at Disney Springs.
Yeah.
I will say the one thing that I saw when I was watching the film print that I kind of forgot about is how film can get dirty and have like little scratches and stuff in it, and you can see like dust or something that looks like it's on the screen itself, and it can be a little distracting sometimes, especially where that dust or whatever it is appears on the film strip, because it could be on someone's face and it just looks like there's something on someone's face that you want to wipe away, but you can't. And then slowly as the frames are moving, the dust kind of moves along the side of the screen. And so it can be a little distracting, but it's still kind of an old school thing that you just don't see that often these days.
No.
That's why it's important to take care of your projection and your bulbs, and you have to make sure it's nice and clean until you thread it in.
Correct. I wasn't a projectionist, but I hear you.
It's very important.
All right, let's talk about the movie itself. So, Bobby, I'm going to ask you first.
Yeah.
What did you think of Oppenheimer?
I think that I need to see it again. Honestly, I didn't think I would have that. I didn't think I would have that answer when I went into it, but honestly, because what you hear going into it is that it's a movie that's 3 hours long and it's mostly men talking in rooms, or, there's a lot of dialogue heavy stuff. So I'm like, okay, I'm fine with that. I don't have any issue with that at all, as long as the conversation is compelling. And it is, but I found myself, I know that there's articles out there, and once again, there's the infamous audio issues in terms of when you're watching this movie and some of the dialogue can be hard to hear. But even with that, I felt like because the way the movie is put together, I found like I felt like I was lost sometimes. And I was like, man, maybe I'm just not keeping up well enough with this movie, because while I'm into what I'm seeing and enjoying this on its merits of the acting is great, the story is very compelling in terms of what's going on with Oppenheimer and how he develops the bomb and the team that he uses and even the individuals within his team, all that is great. But then I just felt sometimes like I was like, oh, I don't quite know what's going on quite the way that I think I should. And so I was like, maybe I have to see it again. It's almost like, to a certain degree, without it being on the same level, but it's when you watch something like The West Wing, and there's like a lot of dialogue, and then there's different things going on, and you're like, okay, I know what that scene's about, but I don't know that I grasped everything out of it. So I might need to rewatch that again to pull some extra stuff out of it. That's kind of how I felt within watching the movie. I was following along, but there were still certain things where I was like, maybe if I go back and rewatch this, I'll catch on some of these things. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic in terms of the presentation of this story and the look and feel of it. And one of the things that stood out to me the most that typically doesn't, and it's usually an area in which you mentioned more so than anyone else, David, is the score. Like, Ludwig is the person who did the score for this movie, and the way that this movie uses music and sound, I think, stood out to me more so than any movie I think I've seen in quite some time, because there's a lot of scenes where there's not really any talking, but there's something intense going on the screen. And so you can't help but to pay attention to the score. And so I would find myself really feeling the way the music was intending you to feel within the moments of the scene. And so that really stood out to me quite a bit in terms of a film. And so that matched up really well in terms of what I was seeing with the visuals, and just the overall direction, cinematography of the movie was great as well. And I just think that with this one, I don't know in terms of where I would rank it in all of Nolan's history of his films, but it's one I feel like is up there in terms of, because of the scope of it and what it has to say and the overall message that it's giving when you sit there and really kind of take it in and really let it sort of wash over you. So it's one that, like I said, I feel like I'll watch a second time and really be able to pull some more out of it. But ultimately, I just thought it was really well done.
Michelle, what did you think of Oppenheimer?
I think I'm right there with Bobby. There is definitely a Sorkin-esque writing that's happening. It's definitely the most, I think, for Christopher Nolan and his films, this is the most, the writing style of Aaron Sorkin is definitely very, it's extremely similar in this film in many scenes. Unfortunately, I have to agree with Bobby. Like, there were times I was watching it going, I get the gist of what's happening, but I think I got lost almost in the scientific terms of it all and the speed of which those were happening. So I was not grasping things quite as quickly. And I was kind of like, okay, yeah, I get the gist of this, but I'm not getting the full picture, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. And I kind of had to move past it too. So for me, it wasn't even quite like the volume or the sound of the actors and what they were saying. It was more, I think, and not really the speed of what they were saying. It was more almost actually what they were saying, like, the basics of of the theory of physics. I get some of the basics, but I did, like, there's definitely other things that they're talking. I was going, yeah, they're losing me in the science here, and I really am trying to follow along. So I make sure I grasp everything. It's been a while since I've been in school, so I was trying, but I will say overall, like, I really enjoyed this film. It's I feel like films like this are starting to get a little bit harder to look at with the eyes that I currently have in the time period that we currently live in my current opinions on things. Like, it's very hard to watch a film and not see diversity through, sexuality or through the people's backgrounds. So it's kind of hard to separate that out of this film. This is a time period where it was a bunch of white old dudes in rooms. Not really old per se, but a bunch of white dudes in rooms talking about important things. And they were the ones making and calling all the shots of the world. And so I have to keep in check that that's what the time was. So that's what the film is going to reflect. But it is a time during World War II where we were still using a lot of Asian Americans to help develop things, and I feel like there was no Asian Americans in this film, and I thought that was kind of weird. But I don't know. Overall, I would say, like, I enjoyed this film. Visually, it is stunning, and I think the effects that they used in such a brilliant way. It's almost like it's subtle. I guess people were going into this film thinking it was going to be in their face, and it's not. And that's what I think I like the most, is it's really not as in your face as I think what you're thinking it is when you're going to see a movie about a man who creates the A-bomb. So, but visually it's great. I think sound-wise it's amazing. The mixing, The music, the score, the acting is spectacular. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. for sure is going to get I can't think of it.
Nomination?
A nomination for
supporting actor.
Supporting actor. Cillian will probably get a nomination for lead actor. And I think that's great. Like their performances were quite amazing. And yeah, I think overall great. I think this is one of Nolan's bests. In the audio, not the audio file, in the history of his film, his filmography, it's somewhere in the middle. I think for me as a whole, I think he's had other works that stand out a little bit more, but it's still really good. And it is a over 3 hour long film, and I wouldn't say there was times I felt that it was 3 hours long. I feel like it flowed pretty well for what they were talking about. I really love the way Nolan uses color and then also black and white in telling the story, of the perspective of how the story shifts. It's black and white when it's basically not Oppenheimer's perspective, and so it's interesting to see that kind of play out. It's another way Nolan plays with time, and I really like that. I thought that was pretty sweet. I don't know. I really liked it. I'm looking forward to watching this film again. Actually, I think just to get more of it, because it's a lot that's kind of coming at you in a way.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I
me. I don't think I'm going to say much different from the two of you. I overall really enjoyed the movie. I am a big Christopher Nolan fan in general. I think I told you, Michelle, either before or after. It was like this. There's only a handful of directors working that, for me, like when one of their movies comes out, it's like, even if it's a movie that I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be as good as the others, I was going into this like almost like Christmas morning in a way, because it's like that at least at the bare minimum visually it's going to be stunning, even if the story isn't told very well, like even if it just feels like it's going to be too long, I'm going to go sit in a movie theater and look at something that just looks amazing, and I'm all for that. And so yeah, I was pretty pumped about going to see it. So it bummed me out being in that, since we were in San Diego at Comic-Con, we didn't get to see it as soon as I'd like. But anyway, we were distracted by other stuff.
There was cool stuff happening.
There was totally cool stuff happening. But yeah, no, I enjoyed the movie quite a bit. Kind of like, I guess both of you have said to an extent, like, I don't know where I would put it in the Nolan filmography, like in terms of best to worst. I would definitely need to see this movie again before I would make that kind of judgment. Mm-hmm. And there's other Christopher Nolan movies I would need to see again as well. Like I don't think I saw Dunkirk twice.
I'd like to watch
for example. Yeah. And there's others of his I still haven't even seen. But yeah, no, I like the film. I'm getting a look from Michelle. She's shocked that I haven't seen certain movies of it. But there's actually no buts. I mean, yeah, you're right, Michelle. It's 3 hours, but I didn't have a problem with the length. I get what you guys are saying, though. You're not wrong. This is a movie that you really have to stay focused on. Like, and there were a couple times for me too where maybe my mind just drifted for a split second, like onto something, and then sure enough I found myself going, wait, I must have missed a word or something that somebody said, because now I'm slightly confused. With that said, I was still able to get the gist of everything going on, and I still enjoyed the movie. But it is not a movie that you can let your mind wander too much with, or you're going to be really lost. But the way it jumps around with time worked for me. Maybe I could see where for some people, maybe it would be a little confusing, but I didn't have any issues with that. I will say, like, if a general audience moviegoer were to come to me and go, hey, should I see this? And, I don't know what I think about it, and what should I see this film? If anything, I would say go into it knowing, like, you're not necessarily seeing a movie just straight up about how they developed the first atomic bomb. Like, this is a biopic. Like, I'm not going to say it's a conventional biopic. I don't think it is. I've talked about my usual dislike of conventional biopics, and this is not one of those movies, but it is a biopic. It's a story about him.
Yeah.
And yes, making the first atomic bomb is a huge part of that story, of course, but it's not like, this is not a kind of somewhat documentary on how, the Manhattan Project worked and how that went down. So I think it's one thing maybe I could see keeping in mind if you haven't seen this movie yet and you're wanting to know like what kind of experience you're going to have. With that said, I think you're going to have a good experience. I think it's a very good movie.
It's interesting. I would say that it's, a lot of people going back to the sound issue. Like everybody complains like Nolan's sound is never that great. And that's because he likes to basically use what he's recording off the set, and he doesn't like to have his actors come back in and re-record vocal work.
And when you're saying sound, you're specifically talking about dialogue.
I'm specifically talking dialogue. I'm sorry, I should be more specific. So the dialogue. So he doesn't have his actors come back in to re-record dialogue. And I respect that, honestly. And I will say there's some films that I have some issues with dialogue. This one, I actually didn't have that much issue with the volume of the dialogue that was being spoken. Sometimes it was the actual dialogue itself, because it was going at a pace that I'm not used to really in a Chris Nolan film, more of an Aaron Sorkin film. And then 2, it's a lot of science that, you're talking about theory of physics here. It's not,
right.
It's not basic math or, English. It's high level stuff here. So that's the only time I had issues. But I feel like as far as the dialogue volume goes, it was one of the few films of his I actually didn't have that issue with.
I would say it's not as bad, I think, as some of the others. Like, you think of Dark Knight Rises and all the drama behind that. You think about Interstellar and a couple of the scenes in that. But I do remember there were times watching this that I was like a word I wouldn't quite catch. And in hindsight, I think it's one of those situations where indeed if they had recorded ADR in this movie, it probably was a word or two that I would have ended up understanding. And that's why I didn't. But I would agree. I don't think it's as bad as some of his others.
But yeah, I think visually I think it's up there with Interstellar. I think it's one of the most beautiful films that he's done. Visually, it is stunning. I think the big takeaway here is, and I've heard this in other people's reviews, and this is the thing I was kind of coming out of the theater with in my feeling, was that it's really nice to see somebody using film and IMAX film in a way that is not just a huge summer blockbuster action film. Like on one side, it's great to use those things for things, like Mission Impossibles or like a Marvel film or something. That would be amazing. But to use this in a drama setting, like it's very different. To use this kind of platform in a drama setting is unique because you're getting really major close-ups of the actors. You're getting really long shots of their faces, and it sets a tone. It's like the beginning of film history. When film noir came in, there would be a lot of like just a guy, and it's a shot of man and shadows, and it was foreboding, and it was also scary I don't know what's going to happen to this character, and it would cause anxiety. And that's in a way what Nolan's doing here with this platform, and it's unique to see it used in this way and not just in an action setting. So I applaud him for that. I think this is a great way to utilize this kind of this way of filmmaking. I think it's really great.
All right. Bobby, any other thoughts?
I just want to quickly give a shout out to Josh Hartnett in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
It took me a good
It took me a second.
I don't know. Yeah, it took me a second. Because I was like, he looks familiar. I think I know this actor, but I can't quite place it. And it just maybe took me a little bit longer than I'd like to admit that it took me. And when I say that, it probably took me like maybe 5 minutes before I was able to be like, it's Josh Hartnett. And
it was most of that
because I
scene.
haven't seen him in forever.
Yeah.
And so it's just like he's changed, but he still has some of that look about him.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, and one of the things that went through my head is I think I had read an article recently that I don't know who was quoted as saying it, but maybe it was Christopher Nolan who had said that it was between him and Christian Bale to play Batman in the Christopher Nolan movies. And then I was like, as I was watching the movie, because that came into my mind as I was watching the movie, I was like watching him closely, and I was like, ooh, he might have made a pretty decent Batman back in the day. It just depends. Yeah. It was like kind of a funny thing. But yeah, I liked him in the movie, and I was like, man, I hope I get to see him doing more stuff now after this.
It was funny. My first thought was, that guy kind of looks like Josh Hartnett, but I don't think it's him. Yeah. No, wait. Oh my gosh, I think that's Josh Hartnett. Like, it was this whole like weird, like I tried to psych myself out of thinking that's who it was. It was really weird. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it took me a second.
Yeah.
And I know we're not talking spoilers, and that's not a spoiler, but I mean there's also, I would say, there's a lot of actors that pop up in this movie that, you don't see in trailers. So if you haven't seen it yet, you'll probably be surprised by the quite the huge cast beyond what you already know is a big cast just from the marketing.
I saw this great reel, and it was the meme from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with Leo going like snapping and pointing at the TV, and it was every time an actor popped up, he's like, oh, and then it would show how you would know that actor. So it was like every single person in the film and what you would mostly
people would think of,
what you would associate that actor with,
right.
So it was just. Like David Krumholtz, immediately it was associated with 10 Things I Hate About You and then the Santa Claus. And so it was like 2 shots of him really quick like that. And then it was, so it went through like the film like that. It was really kind of funny to watch it. But every time they interject it with Leo going, oh, snapping his fingers. So it's like, nice. I was like, that's kind of how it is. And that is kind of how it is in this movie. So it was funny.
So yeah, I think we all liked it.
Yeah.
Not sure that there's anything else to add, at least not without talking about spoilers. And we're not going to do that on this one. So
it's a historical film.
Unless you guys have anything else, we're going to move on. So with that, it is time to move on to the other half of Barbenheimer, Barbie. As I mentioned, Michelle and I finally saw this just a couple nights ago. Bobby, I think it's been more like a week or so for you since you saw it.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, I mean, it feels like it was a long time ago, honestly, for some reason. I think it's because I've seen a few movies since then. I've seen like at least 3, maybe 4 movies in between the last time when I saw that.
Bobby's popping them out.
Yeah, so that's why it feels like forever.
Well, we just saw it. And before we get into the movie, I will just say, we all probably know about the box office numbers with these movies. I don't have them in front of me right now as we're recording, and maybe I can pull them up as I talk. But anyway,
it's over 155.
This movie is doing quite well.
Yeah.
And we saw this movie on a Tuesday night, almost 2 weeks after it had released. And it's just insane that it was a full theater. I'm not saying it was technically sold out, but it was basically a sold out theater. Not only a sold out theater, but people arriving like it's opening night, like full, like different, not costumes, but pink clothes.
A lot of pink.
And a couple different groups, at least, of a group of people all wearing the same like Barbie shirt. There was a lot of that on a Tuesday night. Again, like 2 weeks after this movie was released.
10 days after it opens, 11 days after it opens.
Yeah, I mean,
like that's saying something.
When the Warner Brothers logo popped up and we're getting the movie started, it's like there was cheering and excitement about seeing this movie. And I mean, I don't know how many people were in there that had already seen it, probably once or maybe twice. I have no idea, but it was impressive.
It was full, all but the first 2 rows, man.
Yeah.
Like, there were people in the 3rd row. I could visually, I'm like, there's people in the 3rd row. 2nd row, I didn't see, but yeah, it was full.
Yeah, I had the same experience. Even when I just had recently went to go watch Oppenheimer, it was, and I saw Oppenheimer, what was it, last Friday, maybe, I think it was. And so this was like not as recent as you guys, obviously, but still, it was just a sea of pink, and it was just incredible to see the theater so packed and line so long. And that was just that time. The time when I actually went to go see the movie, same thing. It was just long lines at the concession stand, lots of people wearing pink, and it was just incredible to see that many people at the theater. Because I don't think I've seen that this entire summer for any singular movie that's been out. Not to that level, not to that capacity. So having these two movies out, the whole Barbenheimer thing. And by the way, let me point out something that I don't know if you guys agree with or if anyone has even talked about this. So, the whole Barbenheimer thing, it became obviously a meme and people picked up on it and ran with it. And it was very organic in the way that it happened. But oddly enough, I feel like the person who started that was the person who reinvigorated the theaters last year, which was Tom Cruise. I don't feel like I saw anyone mentioning the two movies as a combo before he had snapshotted a picture of him and Christopher McQuarrie having a ticket of him going to go see Barbie and a ticket of him seeing Oppenheimer. Like before that, I felt like the conversation was, oh, these two movies are coming out on the same weekend. It's going to go head to head. And I don't think I heard people talking about seeing both, seeing it as a duo. And then I saw them do that snapshot thing, and then it seemed like it started to become a thing. Like, well, you don't have to see one or the other. You can actually see both if you want. And so it seems like it grew from there. And oddly enough, what seems ironic to me is that Tom Cruise became the instrument of his own destruction, so to speak, because everyone went and got tickets for those two movies, but disregarded Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, which was the odd thing about it. I did see Greta Gerwig and whatchamacall, I can't think of her name all of a sudden. Margot Robbie. That they had tickets to see Mission Impossible and posted that, but and Oppenheimer. But yeah, it's just funny that I felt like Tom Cruise kind of started it without actually knowing that he would do
it's
that.
Like, I don't want to say he caused a fuss or a ruckus, but in his attempts to argue why Mission Impossible should stay in the larger screens an extra week up against Oppenheimer and not let, it's like he drew so much more attention to them instead of Mission Impossible. And that was his whole thing, was he was just trying to be like, no, but like my film is really, it's made for, the Dolby Digital. It's made for this. Don't bump me out. And he's not wrong, but at the same time, like Oppenheimer's also made a certain way. Like you had your week or two and now it's time for these two films. And it's like he basically drew the attention to the two films coming out, I think, in a way, in kind of screwed his own film away a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of criminal how few people have seen Dead Reckoning. And I say that, and it's like made $400 million, I think, but it definitely should have made more because it should be talked about as well for this summer.
It suffered. It didn't do as well in the States as it probably should have, honestly.
No.
It's a shame.
When we talked about it in our review, I think we all basically loved that movie, and it is crazy to me
so good.
that, not to say it didn't make good money, it made money, but
right.
Anyway, but we also, I think, talked about the fact that why were these two IMAX released so close together? I mean, it's one thing to go, hey, here's a movie that was shot in IMAX, and we're gonna promote, obviously this is going to take over IMAX theaters, and then to just have another big budget film, but maybe it wasn't shot in IMAX, and then fine, see it in Dolby Cinema or something. But these are both films shot with IMAX cameras. Like, it blows my mind that they weren't spread apart.
Yeah, it is surprising that Oppenheimer wasn't held just one more week, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Especially because we all had waited so long for Mission Impossible. Like, it had been bumped so many times. I don't know the logistics of
I know I read recently, I don't think the Marvels was shot with IMAX cameras. Maybe it was in some extent. I have no idea, but I know IMAX as a company has said, like, because I guess Marvels and Dune 2 are coming out basically either the same weekend or very close to each other, that IMAX is like, Marvels will not be in an IMAX screen because Dune 2 will be the priority for them, like, which is understandable. So
I'm excited about about the Marvels. Don't get me wrong. But I am seeing Dune 2 in a very specific format. I will fight you for it.
And I don't think that there's any part of the Marvels that was shot in the IMAX.
I didn't think so either.
Right.
I think it's just one of those things where typically a big movie will get shown in the IMAX because there's not another IMAX movie to compete with it. And obviously, if on paper, it should win out in that respect because Dune 2, from what I understand, I think it was almost entirely shot with the IMAX cameras. So it just lends itself to being
like
shown
it goes without
in
saying.
that theater.
It's like what David was saying. There's certain directors that I will always go into any of their films, even if I'm like, I don't know if I'm not interested in it, but because this director has that film, I'm going to go see this film. And it's going to be Christmas morning.
We know how you feel about Denis.
Oh, I love Denis. Denis. I have a little crush on Denis. Denis Villeneuve.
What was that? Comic-Con 2018?
Oh, man, that was an exciting day.
18, 17, somewhere.
It was like right there.
I think it was 2018.
It was like right there.
Okay.
It was so cool.
But hey, Barbie.
What about Barbie?
Yeah.
Let's talk Barbie. And another director that I enjoy.
Reverse this order.
And go,
well, because we're going to talk to spoilers.
So you first, David.
All right. So we are going to just share our spoiler-free thoughts first. We're not going to talk about spoilers yet. But yes, I have a feeling we're going to want to talk spoilers in this movie. So we will give you plenty of warning before we do that. Barbie. So this is a movie I have gone kind of up and down about, leading up to the release. And I'm thinking way back, like to the first couple trailers when we first got them. And I mean, even before the trailers, knowing, hey, they're making a Barbie movie. Okay, whatever. But then seeing the first trailer and knowing it's Greta Gerwig, it's like, okay, the only reason I'm probably even giving this trailer the attention I would give it is because it's like, this is Greta Gerwig. She's a great director. I loved Lady Bird. Big fan of Little Women. But I remember seeing that first trailer and then the second trailer, and I was kind of like, I don't really know what's going on here and what I think of this. In one sense, it looks fun. But in another sense, what is happening? Like, what is this? What is happening? And then, as the movie got closer and kind of getting a sense of what the movie's going to be about, I was all for it. And again, big fan of the director. But I wouldn't say it was like a huge priority. Like, the opening weekend, if I had a choice, I could only see one. I would have seen Oppenheimer. Not shocking. Going into this, finally, I went up and down. I was getting to a point, I think, where I was like, okay, this could be really, really good. And then I was like getting closer to when I finally saw it. I think I was starting to feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm going to go into this and just be kind of middle of the road. I don't know why. I just have this sense that that's how I'm going to be. Overall, I enjoyed Barbie. I thought it was a very good movie. I will say, for me, there was probably a point, maybe about halfway through the film, that I was kind of like, I'm not sure what I think of this. Like, in one sense, there's definitely a lot of funny moments, and I love the way this movie looks, and it's fun. But I'm also not really sure what I think of this as a movie overall. But then the movie ended, and overall, I enjoyed it. Not saying it's perfect. I'm not going to go into like a bunch of criticisms about this film when we talk about spoilers, but I would just say I enjoyed it. Maybe the only reason I didn't love it is because it's just, not for me, but I think it's a very good film. There's no doubt that I loved the message of the movie. Definitely have no problems with that, but that's kind of my quick take on Barbie. I enjoyed it. I didn't love it, but I enjoyed the film.
I mean, I remember when the first teaser trailer dropped, and I was like, what the heck what did we just watch? Like, it was so like, I think I actually watched it almost twice in a row, because I was like, wait, what just happened? Like, what was that? And that was before the end of the year. And I remember we were doing our, like, what we're looking forward to in 2023. And I was like, I got to see Barbie. I'm like, I don't even know what the heck is happening in this film yet. All I've seen is this crazy teaser trailer. And I was like, yeah, I got to see it. I was like, this is going to have to happen. And it was definitely one of the films I was looking forward to this year. And all I got to say is it did not disappoint. I love this film. I would be extremely surprised if this does not end up somewhere in my top 10. I'll go ahead and make that prediction. This film was fun, and it was I mean, for me it was kind of like a rejuvenation, a walk through down memory lane in my childhood. I wouldn't say I was like the biggest Barbie person, but I enjoyed Barbies. Like, I had a good amount of Barbies, and I played with Barbies, and my friends and I, we hung out, we played Barbies. I mean, we might have thrown in some Masters of the Universe in with them and some Ninja Turtles and did a couple other things, but we played with Barbies. Like, that's what we did in the 80s, man. It was like, it just is what it is. And so, no, I mean, like, I see what David's saying about how, like, halfway through you're kind of going, okay, this needs to go somewhere. Something needs to happen to really, like, jump this movie up to the next level without it just kind of being about Barbie and being a Mattel and being a flashback for all of us, you know, like, in Gen Xers, you know, elder millennials, peoples. Like, this needs to be more than just a walk down memory lane. It needs to have some bite to it, and it does. It gets to a point where it really, you know, it has a message about, you know, patriarchy and, like, finding yourself as a person and finding yourself as a woman, and, like, there's a lot of layers to it, but it's done in such a creative and inventful and fresh way. And the humor, I think, is really great. It's really punchy sometimes in your face, but it's what makes it really kind of awesome. And so, no, I loved this film. The look of it, just, you know, the fact that they built this amazing set and that they did it to a scale that made sense, that if you're a Barbie, you're actually larger than a lot of the stuff you're playing inside. And so, like, that makes sense, and they did that. And that's really cool. The whole thing was awesome. I think the needle drop is really brilliant. I love that they got so many great current contemporary artists to create songs, original songs, just specifically for this film. It's very, very, very good. I really love this movie. I liked it a lot. I had nothing. I was laughing and crying through the whole thing.
And real quick, I could see a situation where, you know, now that I've seen it once, and I know, like, the kind of world and, like, general, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, the kind of the way this story is being told, maybe I would watch it again and have more appreciation for it. I could see where that's a situation.
Yeah.
But that's my take after one viewing, anyway. But Bobby, what did you think of Barbie? I know it's been longer for you. It's been like a week or more.
Right.
But
yeah.
But what did you think of the film?
I mean, pretty much, I would say I really have nothing to add beyond what you said. I feel like I'm on the exact same page as you, David. I don't really know that I can add any extra words. So if you want to know how I feel, just rewind this and go back and listen to what David said, and that's how I felt. I mean, I really can't add too much more.
That's funny.
Other than just, I think initially I really felt like aesthetically it just is very something that approximates what you would have seen. And I mean, it's not like I had any Barbie dolls or a playhouse or anything. I mean, shocking, but no, I had G.I. Joe, I had Transformers and He-Man. But
Transformers?
No. Yeah, no Transformers. What? What? But obviously you've seen 100 Barbie commercials. You know what those things look like, and the play sets and stuff. So you can obviously see that there's a lot of attention to detail that was put into the sets, and that's like comes off so well within the movie. And I think that I was glad that there was more to it than just that, because I think that in watching the movie, there's a point where I felt like if it's just going to be this, it would have burned me out pretty quick in terms of as a movie. So I was happy when it sort of shift gears, so to speak, and gets into some other stuff. And I definitely would say for me, the emotional beats resonated a little bit more with me than a lot of the comedy beats. I laughed at a few things or smiled at some things, but overall, I think the heart of it got to me more so than the comedy of it.
Right.
This guy was giggling a few times.
Oh, there's definitely
there's definitely some things in there that are funny for sure.
I mean, there's the whole beach scene, but
But there's a lot of things that they try to do for comedy-wise, and it can be hit or miss.
Correct. No, totally.
Yeah. Well, those are our quick spoiler-free thoughts. I guess we'll just go ahead and jump into spoilers, unless you guys have anything else you want to add really quick.
No, I think I'd like to talk about spoilers, because I think I'd like to have a little discussion about the ending, because you and I kind of have had a small discussion about the ending.
Sure. So from here on out, we are going to talk spoilers for Greta Gerwig's Barbie. You have been warned. If you haven't seen the film, we would recommend you see it first and then come back to this and finish this episode later. All right.
I'd be surprised if you haven't seen this film. Based on how much money it's made, and it's already in its third or fourth week. I'd be surprised if you hadn't seen it.
If you wanted to see it, actually. To this, I don't think they've seen it yet, so they might be the two people. There we go.
I don't think my parents have seen it yet, but
there we go. 4 people.
I think my mom is at least planning to see it next week.
So yeah, spoiler warning is out of the way. Spoilers for Barbie. Michelle, it sounds like you have something you want to start with.
Oh, I mean, I guess we could start at the end.
Jump to the end.
We'll just jump to the end. So we'll jump to the end. I think if there was anything on this film that I did bump with, and I have to agree with David on this, is that I felt like the ending, there was kind of like okay, we're wrapping this up, and we're still kind of wrapping this up. And we're still it just was kind of a drawn out ending. And not in but not that it was bad.
And not in a like end of Return of the King kind of way. Like more like and for me it was more a single scene that just kind of went on a little long.
Oh, what was the scene?
The scene between her and Ruth, like
you thought that scene went
I thought that scene in particular seemed a little drawn out. It's a very great scene. Overall, like other than the fact that I felt like it was kind of just going on a little too long. Like in terms of the pacing of the movie in general, like that scene in particular was like, okay, we are lingering here in this moment between the two of them with the like kind of weird like flowy color background. Just that seemed to linger, but I liked the scene, but too long for me.
I think what it is I like that scene a lot, and I don't think that that's too long. I think the problem is that we spent too much time in the scene just before it. I think in the resolution with the Kins, that scene took too long. And because that scene took so long, it made the other scene seem like it was a little long in a way. Because for me, it was the resolution with the Kins, like it was like, okay, we're resolved. Okay, we're still resolving. And we're still resolving the same thing. We're all accepting the same resolution. It was like this repetitive moment in the film where they're having this whole situation, and I'm going, why are we still hanging out on this? Like that to me seemed to take a while. And then when we got to Ruth, I think that scene was brilliant. And I don't think it needs to be shorter. I think the problem is that because the other scene seems so long, it just seemed like it was like, okay, there's another scene with a whole nother resolution to this other part that's happening in the film. Because there are a few things that are going on in this film, a few points, and I think Barbie choosing to become real, you need to give it a minute. There's a lot for her to take in. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Bobby, sounded like you were going to say something.
No, I was just thinking about what you were saying. I don't know. You saying it, I can definitely say that, yeah, it's true. I think within the moment of the time, I didn't think too much about it, other than it did seem a little drawn out. But I don't necessarily know that I thought too much within the moment of it. But I think for me, the interesting thing about this movie is that it really just tells you, just go along on this ride with us, because don't try and think too much about the rules of this movie. No. Just go with it.
Right.
Because when you start to try and think about a lot of the different things, whether it's, well, how are they actually this real thing in this Barbie land? And how does that work with the toy company Mattel that Will Ferrell runs? Like, there's a lot of stuff in there that you would sit there and start to question, like, how does all this really work in this way? And that's not the importance of the film. A lot of it is just this journey that Barbie goes on of self-discovery and really what she's going through, and then also this story at the center, and I forget her character's name, but America
Ferrera.
Where she is where she is the one that's actually going through all these emotions, and this was her Barbie as opposed to her daughter's, which is how they sort of set it up, which I thought was a nice little twist on that, because you totally think it's going to be that one thing, and it made sense, but then it's the other, and it's like, oh, okay, I like this, and it really delves into how she's trying to rediscover that while she's also has her daughter and has that distance with her own daughter, and this commonality, and still going around this idea of how dolls and Barbies were a big part of growing up in our real society, our real world. A lot of girls have played with Barbie dolls of different types, and they are represented in the movie of all different kinds, and I think they do that so well, of telling that and telling this within a message that it comes across, and that's the part that you really pull from it. And I think that's why it resonates so well with a lot of women, and why it's doing so well for them. And there's obviously that speech that America gives in the film.
Oh, yeah.
And it's meant for women in a way that's it can totally be empowering. And as a guy, you can sit there, and a lot of people seem to want to politicize how a woman feels, which is odd, but it's just the way that some people want to make it about their own feelings of whatever insecurities or something, to uplift someone else seems to, their feelings, put them down or pushing them out of the picture. And it's just unfortunate that that's the message that they pull from it, as opposed to, this is something that's good for women in their own self-worth. And I don't know. It's just, it's interesting how some things become a topic of another kind of thing, and just a way to sort of more or less isolate and push people further away, as opposed to bringing them together. So, I don't know.
Yeah, the whole film, and especially that scene where she gives the speech, it's validating for women. These are how we feel. So it's hard to hear a lot of people tear that down.
Yeah. I understand that. Yeah, it's you can't help but to relate it to, like, I'm watching it and I'm like, even though I'm not a woman, I can apply that to myself as a black man, and it's like I can see a lot of those things in myself, and so it's like it can be a relatable thing.
The back and forth, the constant, like, well, I have to be this way, but I also have to be this way, because if I go too far that way, then I'm going to be perceived this way. Like, these are real thoughts that people have. So
yeah.
But no, it's sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I think as a whole, it's a really great story, and I just can't applaud Greta more. I'm so emotional about this film. No, she did a great job. It's really good.
No, and it's obviously connecting, like you said, Bobby and Michelle. Like, it's obviously connecting to a lot of people, a lot of women. I mean, the fact again that it's still doing so well so far. I say so far; it's been a couple weeks, but a couple weeks after its release, like it's.
I mean, obviously,
it's connecting in a way that then makes me almost scared of like, okay, then how will studios react to this? Like, not to say we shouldn't have more movies like this, absolutely, but what it will be their interpretation of what are movies like this? Like for instance, not for instance, but you know what I mean? I don't know. You could see a world where studios get it wrong, where we are bombarded with, oh well, let's do a bunch of like toys for girls movies. Like, no, that's not.
Oh, that's already happening anyway.
Right.
Well, it's like I don't really want.
I think I saw a Polly Pocket movie is coming out.
That's the plan. Mattel apparently has this all laid out with Warner Brothers. They've got a plethora of films that they're gonna do.
I've seen that as well. Stupid. But you guys, I think, know what I'm talking about. Like,
I know what you're talking about, but like, I don't really want a Barbie 2. I'm good.
Right.
Barbie is awesome. We're good. We've completed the story. It has come to a conclusion. We're good. Like, I'm with you. Like, I don't want the same. I don't want a rinse and repeat just with a different IP. Mm-hmm. That's not what we're trying to. Yeah, no. I'm with you. Right. I don't want to see that. But no, it was a fun movie to watch, to see like, some of the throwback stuff in Barbie. I mean, obviously Alan, he's a huge throwback, but it's like Skipper, and Skipper's in her little like tree house. She doesn't even have a house. She has a tree house that she lives in. It's like this little tiny thing, and so it's like, there's outfits. There was an outfit that was like the Ice Capades outfit. I was like, I had that one. Like, there was different outfits, like the rollerblading outfit. I was like, I had that one. Like, there was like, it's like little things that you kind of pick up on. And you're like, oh yeah, that was cool too. Yeah. And there's been so many variations of the Barbie dream house. So it's like, they didn't have to basically replicate one dream house. They basically just kind of made their own Barbie dream house, because there's been so many variations of it that it's almost like, oh, well, it's just Barbie's dream house. It just is what it is. Like, they didn't have to follow a blueprint, which was great. So it was really, I don't know, it was really inventive. I really liked when Ken like ran into the water and hit the wave. I was like, that's amazing. Right. Like, there's just so many little details that they did in this film that just they're brilliant. And like, I'll be honest, like, Ryan Gosling as Ken is so good. He's so like dumb and good all at the same time. And so his performance is really enjoyable. Like, it almost is like, he could be nominated. I get that. I do. I would get that nomination. I understand that nomination. Like, it makes sense to me. But even just the Kens as a whole, like, I liked how they were just kind of represented. Like, oh, I'm just a Ken. Like, oh. Because there were so many times, like, we would throw Ken to the side and get a G.I. Joe. Like, play with G.I. Joe with Barbie. It just made more sense to us girls. We're like, why would we want a Ken? We have an alpha G.I. Joe. Like, bring that in.
Right.
So it's like, it was just so funny to kind of see it played out in that light. Like, it was just, I don't know. It's a fun movie. It's fun. I liked it a lot. It was really good.
I feel like Barbie is to women what Marvel and DC movies, more so Marvel movies, are to most guys who grew up on comic books or animated movies of these characters that they know so well, and to see those things realized in a live action form that they can point to and be like, oh, I remember that from this comic, or this outfit that character wore, back when they got these powers, or that kind of thing. It's kind of reminiscent of that. And I would also say that although not a lot of people saw it, it's similar to way that I think a lot of people who played D&D feel about the latest Dungeons and Dragons movie that came out as well. They felt like it was very much captured that spirit of playing the game. And so I think that that's where a lot of that comes from as well, for in terms of how many people are going to go see it. It's just, it's bringing to life something that they are so familiar with and have had their whole childhood identity and sometimes formed by or informed by, and to be able to now see that played out on the big screen and have that shared experience with their girlfriends or their moms or whoever, and be like, they can grasp and hold on to that because it's something tangible in a way that it's bringing back a memory and a feeling, and it gives you that all within this movie. And Michelle, you mentioned Ryan Gosling, and he definitely will more than likely get some sort of nomination for sure.
But it was a pretty awesome performance.
I do hope that people don't forget Margot Robbie as well in terms of what she's doing as Barbie, because she has the responsibility of sort of being quote unquote the straight man, and Gosling gets to be, the person that's sort of hamming it up, and those typically get most of the attention. But being the straight man can be very hard because you have to do a certain sort of thing. And she does still display a lot of emotion within this movie, to where there's times like in particular, the scene that stands out is when she goes and is in the real world and she sees who she thinks was the person that plays with her, or so to speak. And she's like, broken and torn down by this little girl around her friends. And that's the first time she's ever had to feel that. And you can see it in Margot Robbie's face and the way she portrays it, and the hurt and the confusion, and it's played so well. And I would say that as much as Ken is getting to do the wild stuff, she still has to carry a lot of the movie, and does so well. And if you want to see Margot Robbie and know that she's being very controlled and playing this role in such a certain sort of way, then go look at her as Harley Quinn, or go check out Babylon, and you can see she can be a completely different character, and then see how refined she is as Barbie. So she's got range, and I think she deserves a nomination as well.
I fully agree. She has range, and her range just keeps getting bigger and bigger, honestly. I feel like as we've watched this wonderful woman as an actress grow every few years through her films, like, she's just getting better and better and better, quite honestly. And this film, she was quite spectacular in it. And America Ferrera was really good as well. Like, there's so many good things. Like, it was fun to watch Will Ferrell kind of be Will Ferrell. They just kind of went, Will, you needed to say something along these lines, but just have a good time. And that's, I think, basically what Greta told him to do in his scenes, was like something around this dialogue, and we'll just go with it. And so, you're getting a lot of really great stuff. I don't know. It was a great movie, I think, with a lot of representation. Everybody can find a little something that's them in it. Male, female, non-gender, non-binary, like, everybody can find something in them as a personality somewhere in this film, and I think that that's what's really kind of nice about it.
Right.
I will say, I don't know how this will come out in terms of how most people feel, because I don't think I've seen one thing one way or the other, but I get that this is another thing. And I'm not as familiar with it because, again, I never dealt with Barbies. But I probably could have done without Kate McKinnon's crazy Barbie. It just didn't quite work for me. I don't know. And I hate saying that because I know Kate McKinnon gets a lot of flack for a lot of different movies she does, and never seems to catch a break. But I don't know. She just didn't work for me as that character, or that character being there in the way that it was. I don't know.
Well, before you say what you're going to say, Michelle,
okay,
I'll say quickly, I get what you're saying. Because
I get it.
Maybe, again, because I don't have a familiarity with Barbie outside of just like the general like pop culture knowledge of Barbie. Like, I didn't play with Barbies either. So that character for me, like, without knowing anything about Barbie, it does seem like, well, we want Kate McKinnon in this, and this seems like a perfect kind of role for her, so we'll create this weird Barbie character. Like, and that's what it seems like, even though I don't get the impression that like there is some background here to weird Barbie, but you know what I mean? Like, that's how it comes across. And I like Kate McKinnon, kind of like you just said, Bobby. But I can see what you mean before you say what you.
So all I can say is that growing up, and it's funny because I was not this girl because I'm so A-type and things have to be neat and clean and precise. But I had girlfriends, and they always seemed to have one Barbie that it had gone through the 7 circles of hell and is somehow still physically here. Like, the vacuum cleaner has had it, the dog has eaten half of it. They have drawn on it. They have lit it on fire. They have cut its hair. Like, all the things that they depicted in the film. I've had girlfriends that did that to at least one Barbie. And it was the weird Barbie. It was the, like, rough and tumble, like, I don't care about this Barbie, and I'm going to do what I feel like I want to do with this Barbie. And I mean, I don't know if you guys had, a Masters of the Universe or a Turtle or a Transformer, that maybe there was one that you were like, I'm taking this one apart, and just tore it apart and did whatever you wanted to it.
I never did that. I know people who did, but I never
there we go.
Did that to my stuff.
And so there are certain people, and again, I did not do this to a Barbie because I am too much of a A-type girl to do that, but there are other girls that are not, and they would have one Barbie that always just looked like hell. And the head was always, you always find it laying down with its face down and its head up and one leg up to a side, and you're like, what the hell happened to this Barbie? Like, and you're like, did your baby sister get to? No, I did that. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I don't mean I don't want to be judgy. Like, it was always like this weird, creepy. One eye is gouged out, and like the one ear hole. Some Barbies eventually, through time, wound up having holes for piercings for earrings. They always have one that would be like torn out completely, and you're like, oh, ripped out Barbie's earring, like, and then ripped her ear. Like, there was always this one tortured Barbie, and like it's kind of a thing within the Barbie culture. Like, some girls just did that. I don't understand it, but it exists, and I've seen it. I've witnessed to it.
So Weird Barbie worked for you.
Weird Barbie worked for me because it's something that exists. Like, it's not that far-fetched. And if you didn't do it to your Barbie, you did it to your My Little Pony.
Right.
I mean, that's just the way it was. I don't know.
I was going to ask, like, maybe this is something I'll admit, like, I just missed. So I am genuinely, like, asking, like, if you guys either bumped on this at all, or what you, like, I don't know. It's a minor nitpicky kind of thing. But, like, going back to, you mentioned, I think one of you mentioned how, like, you can't take the movie too seriously or try to think too much into, like, how this world works. And I think that's indeed portrayed well, like, by how the, like, Mattel board is portrayed, like, because in the trailers you see these shots of the real world, and you see, like, in the trailer some shot of Will Ferrell, like, getting all upset about how they've got to get her, like, back in the box or whatever. And there was a part of me that's like, that added to my confusion. I think when I saw the trailers of, like, how is this really going to play out? Like, this is like a real woman, and there's a real Mattel board. But yeah, in the context of the film, that they are also not to be taken too seriously, and it's perfectly done, in my opinion. But there's a, like, one moment, like, where they're on their way to Barbie Land, right? And, like, the now masculine Ken versions of, like, the Barbie toys are apparently flying off the shelves and doing really well. And on the call, like, Will Ferrell's character kind of dismisses it, like, no, it's still about Barbie, or I don't know how he words it. But then in the rest of the film, there seems to be times where he really is just kind of like a company guy that wants to make money. And so that, when that played out, I was like, why is he reacting this way to the whole, like, the Ken toys selling well, and he seems to kind of still dismiss it. Like,
I don't think I have an answer. I think I have a theory. Okay, so it kind of goes twofold. I think, one, this film, what I do enjoy is that there's not really a quote-unquote bad guy. Like, the Kens get all riled up and do stupid stuff because, Ken thinks he's bringing in, the patriarchy, whatever. And then there's the board, and you kind of are like, oh, they're the bad guys. But I don't think there's really officially, like, a bad guy in this film. I think the board is the board. And I think on one side, yes, he's a CEO that it's like, on one side, he just wants to make sure he's making his money. On the other side, I think he recognizes that with Barbie, it's an IP that you don't mess with, if that makes any sense. So I think he knows that he needs to kind of keep Barbie on track, that Ken is not the main show here. And he realizes that with Barbie out, things are going to get messy. Like, he even says, like, it's going to get all loopy doopy. And I think he knows that in the long run, the money is still, even if in the short run, boys will be like, oh, I'm playing with Ken now. In the long run, it's still going to wind up being Barbie's game, and it should always be Barbie's thing. Okay. And so I guess my theory is, like, I don't think he's a bad guy. I think he's a businessman, and he knows where Barbie is supposed to be, and he knows how it's supposed to be run. And Barbie's running around the real world is not good for the bottom line, and he needs to contain that and to keep it running, keep the ship running on course in a way. But he also likes the Barbie world. Like, he's enjoying the travel into Barbie land. Like, he's having a good time. He's like, oh, this is great. Like, he loves it. Like, he is having fun with it. Like, this is part of his life. Like, and I think that's part of it. I think it's just that there's no real official, like, bad guy. Even though he's a corporate sellout and he just wants money, everybody does.
Right.
But I think in the end, he's not like a bad dude, and he still believes in his IP, and he still wants it to succeed, thus making more money. And so it's like a back and forth thing, but he respects Barbie and what Barbie is and what she's done for the company. I mean, Mattel was going in the hole until Barbie came up.
Right.
And then Mattel, went to toys that we all know and love from the 70s and 80s and 90s. So it's like, until Barbie came around, Mattel was, that was their bread and butter right there.
Okay.
I think what I took from it was similar to Michelle, but not quite as thought out. I thought that for me, when it was Will Ferrell's doing that, I the first thing I thought about is he was still taking the position as what Barbie's position was that the Kens were sort of irrelevant. When Barbie and America are in the car and they're talking about the Kens, and they're just like, well, they're just like whatever, they're there for the Barbies. And I feel like that was just his worldview of what Ken's purpose is as well. And it's like, it doesn't care. He doesn't care that the Kens are selling. It's like, who cares about the Kens? It's like, it's not something that is, like you said, Michelle, sort of sustainable. It's like the Barbie is the bread and butter, and we got to get that back on track. So that's kind of the way I kind of looked at it for the most part, and just thinking of him. And I'd read something, I would give credit if I could remember who it was who said it or where I read it, but someone mentioned that the villain it could be made a case for was Barbie in the movie. Because if you look at the way she treats the Kens as just sort of subservient and not really very feeling. And it's such a great moment, too, when Ken has got all the power in Barbie Land, and he sort of dresses her down when he's like, doesn't feel good, does it? And she has that sort of realization of like, the way I've been treating you guys is now I'm being treated that way, and no, it doesn't feel good. And she comes to that, revelation. And it's like, yeah, I can see how she could have been, in a sense, the villain of the movie in that respect, in terms of, how you treat someone else and how you're treated in return, and seeing your own.
But then if you flip it and you realize that Barbie is just the representation of the patriarchy in the real world, and Kens are really just the representation of women in the real world, then technically,
yeah. Which is funny.
I don't think there's like officially like this is the bad guy, but basically everybody has the ability to be the bad guy in this film, which is kind of what I like. But everybody's not really officially a bad guy. Everybody's a bad guy in somebody's story, right? Like, it's the reality of life,
right.
And one thing I will sort of say, and I said I won't really go and pick at this thread because there's just too much of it, but I did have the thought of like, if America's Doll was stereotypical Barbie played by Margot Robbie, are there multiple stereotypical dolls that look like Margot Robbie?
You're nitpicking at the logic of this film.
Yeah, you're pulling a thread here that's just gonna.
And that's why I said I just want to touch on one, just because there's so many.
The sweater is gonna get very threadbare very quickly.
Yeah, there's so many to pick at, so I don't want to typically touch it, but it's just one thought that I had, just because it was like, huh.
All I can
you don't see others.
Is that you're getting one physicist Barbie, one president Barbie, one Nobel Prize Barbie, one lawyer Barbie, one Dr. Barbie, one veterinarian. You're only gonna in the film they're only representing one Barbie at a time. So even with the stereotypical Barbie, I think they're just trying to kind of lump it in, and that's my quick, easy explanation of that. This is why I haven't thought that through, but that's all I could say. And it's funny, I saw a clip this morning. Greta Gerwig was in an interview and Margot Robbie was with her, and they were saying, how'd you get all this stuff by the studios? Like, how did they allow you guys to just do all this really crazy stuff that honestly doesn't make any sense if you really thought about it? And they're like, yeah, we just wrote the most ape crap script ever, and we threw it at them, and there was so much for them to go through to try to not have that. They so much else crept in, they snuck in so much because there was so much just total bat crazy off the wall stuff. So what very little didn't go in, like, it's because it's one thing if you write a script and there's only like 4 like kind of weird things, the studio will be like, yeah, those 4 weird things, yeah, those are out. It's easy for them to pick them out. And this, she says, she's like, we just did this whole thing. We just went for it. We just threw everything at the wall, and we just hoped they wouldn't completely tear the whole thing down. And there was too much for them to comprehend, and we were able to sneak a whole bunch of crazy stuff in. She's like, and somehow all the crazy just worked. And I was like, that is the best explanation of what I just saw. Like, I was like, actually, that makes a lot of sense, because you really do have to let go of a lot of quote unquote reality when you see this film. You really just have to, you just got to go for the ride, man. You got to get in the Barbie Porsche, and you just got to go for it.
Well, we are running out of time.
We are.
I didn't know if you guys have any last thoughts on Barbie you wanted to share before we wrap this up. Michelle?
All I could say is I enjoyed the hell out of this movie. I think there's so many different little scenes that stand out that are so spectacular. I feel like a lot of the actors and actresses they got for this did a really great job, and I applaud all of them. It was really good.
Probably any last thoughts?
No, I think that's a good place to leave it.
Yeah, same here. I don't really have anything else. That's going to do it for our review of Barbie and this episode of the podcast. We would love to hear back from everybody listening and watching. If you're watching us on YouTube, please leave any questions or comments down below. Make sure to like and subscribe, all that good stuff on YouTube. You can also email us at feedback@flickerfx.com as well. With that, I'm Dave Lott.
Bobby Jackson.
And I'm Michelle Hillard.
Thanks for listening and watching, everybody. Bye-bye.